this lovely girl here is a journalist, a dancer, a poet and a writer all rolled into one. Tishani Doshi is happily exhausted after the launch of her The Pleasure Seekers. She's done a launch in Delhi and her launch in Chennai was happened recently with Sushila Raman in conversation with her. The book is a beautiful piece of work. It's very effortlessly written, but I'm sure a lot of hard work went into it, and now you're running away to the hills for a break.
Yeah. I think after something like this, there's a sense of, you know, the book has a strange afterlife, and as a writer, it's a bit of a time warp. You know, you spend all this time writing the book, and then when you've actually finished with it and you want to move on and do something else, you have to talk about the book, which is actually the last thing that you want to do, but you do it, you know. And so there's a great sense of wanting to just be finished with it and go off and work on other things. And so I'm working on new poems. So that's what's sort of exciting me at the moment and what I'm really involved with.
Now, what I really liked about your book, it's a love story. It spans across many generations, and it talks about love in various contexts and different kinds of love. But the basis is a Gujarati young man marries a Welsh young lady, and then it's the story of their families. What I really liked about the book is that every character is so beautifully fleshed out, even though I mean, the protagonists are Babu and Shan and Mayuri and Bean. Yeah. You know, the parents and the uncles and the aunts, beautiful. How did you do that?
It's quite tough, I think, when you have to, I mean, I think with the novel, the two things that I faced were finding, you know, the perspective. Where are you going, whose story are you going to tell? And then the other thing is, how do you manipulate time? You're telling a story, you know, over 4 decades. So what do you leave in, what do you leave out, which moments do you linger over? So I mean, and that's part of the you know, process, and for me why I took as long as I took was because I kept shifting and I wanted to tell everybody's story, you know, and I had to really rein it in and say, okay, I'm going to focus on these stories and not these, you know. So I had a lot of juggling to do, but I do think this idea of love, you know, for me, I was wanting to explore it with the parents, the sisters, yes, you know, the grandmother, you know, not just love in the romantic sense of
even
love.
Uncle Chotu and Bean,
yes,
even that
yeah,
comes through so nicely.
All these different ways in which love sort of enters our life and saves it somehow or helps it along, you know. So
the word that comes to mind with your book, one of the words, is a sense of equilibrium. I thought it was very balanced, and that you'd worked on this craft, as it were. Is that because of your background in poetry or foundation?
I think it's maybe because I try to do that in my life. Is always a balancing act in general, you know, with the dance, with the poetry, with all of the things that I'm trying to juggle. And so balance is I like to think of myself as a very balanced person, but then my life is sometimes, you know, it's sort of schizophrenic in the sense that it's sometimes intensely social, meeting people and doing things and traveling, and then intensely solitary where I just need to be by myself. So that is also a balancing act, you know, knowing when you want to move and when you want to stay still, and that kind of, you know, is part of my general struggle. So I'm glad that in the book at least, you know, everything appears to be in good balance.
No, but this writing poetry, you know, a certain conveying intense feelings, but with an economy in words.
Yeah.
Does that has that been a big influence in your life as a writer of prose now?
It has. I think, you know, when people say poetic novel, also I think it's great because a lot of the writers I admire began as poets and continue to write poetry and prose, and I think that it's perfectly possible to do that. But there is a sense that, oh, if it's poetic, you know, that means the plot is not that great or this, you know. But I think actually poets, the main thing, at least for me, is this concern with language and finding the right word. It's very important, you know. So for me, I think the sound of things is very important, the rhythm of things, and it's not just sentences that lead one after the other, but how they sound strung together. You know, there has to be a cadence, there has to be a rhythm. And so, you know, I read my poetry aloud, but I read my prose aloud as well to see if it sounds right, and that's the test for me, whether it's working or no. And I think that was one of the things that I wanted to achieve with the book.
I think this is a very audio sort of a novel, you know. It would sound very nice to read in bed to somebody. It's got that feel to it. The other very nice thing about the book is the love story between Babu and Shan, and how uncomplicated and innocent and undemanding and pure it was. And then now as the generations go by, it's very hard to find that kind of thing. Do you really believe that too?
I think my idea with the book was to present a very idealized notion of a love, you know, where the big obstacle comes first. That is, can they be together? But once that is overcome, it's sort of little hiccups and more or less,
for those who've just tuned in, can two people be together is because Babu is Gujarati Jain and Shan is Welsh. And you know, Babu's parents don't want them to marry, so they go through a whole lot of trials.
And neither do hers, so it's double opposition.
It's not that bad from there as it is here, because they bring him back from London with a whole pack of lies.
Yes.
Yeah, so
it does have an element of Bollywood drama or Collywood drama for that matter. But and I think that, you know, this love story for me, the idealized notion of it, was also to sort of compare and contrast this difficulty of love, because then the younger generation go off trying to find their own love story that will be as magical as their parents, and of course they fail. And you know, they sort of have different paths, but they still fail, both of the daughters, you know. And I think a part of that is probably my sort of notion and my idea of how it is to be in love now. And I think even though we have a lot of choice, I think it's quite difficult, or it can be quite difficult.
You know, one of the important characters is Ba. She is Babu's grandmother and a sort of a central figure, a sane, supporting figure. And a lot of people have said that, have asked you whether that is Chandralekha. I wouldn't have known that. I mean, I'm only asking because everybody is asking.
No, it absolutely, none of the characters equate into real life people in that neat and easy way. But I think people, well, Ba has white hair, and I think when people think of Chandra, they always think of that beautiful white hair that, you know.
Do you want to tell everyone about your relationship with Chandra and how you started dancing before you answer this question?
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, in the sense of influences, I think Chandra was a great influence in my life, and I met her around the time when I started working on the novel. So it was this sort of twin journey of beginning the novel and beginning life as a dancer, you know. And it was very beautiful, because I think Chandra was somebody who embodied a lot of things that I was trying to figure out, but she was there and, you know, in the present, and we could have these conversations about what it means to be an artist. And I had really no idea. There are no guidebooks about how do you become a writer and this and that. And it was wonderful to have access to her, and that she kind of really sort of relished the idea that I was a writer rather than a dancer. So it kind of influenced me, and also her house. And I think if you were to find a parallel, it would be Ba's house is a really magical place where people come to heal and to talk and to discuss. And that was very much my life for 6 years. Chandra's house every evening, and go and meet the people there and talking. And it just had a sense of magic about it, of possibility. And that, I think, filtered in through the novel.
And she was a very big influence on Tishani's life. If you go to her website, which I did this morning, there's a sample of her best writings there, and I love those essays on Chandra.
Yeah, well, I think it comes through, you know, and I feel in terms of influences, or in terms of sort of somebody who you meet at that particular point in your life who just switches you around, you know, completely. And Chandra was that person for me. And, you know, the whole element of dance, which I found so fulfilling. Writing is such an uncertain profession, and, you know, you're kind of on your own for a long period of it, and you don't know what's going to come of it. But dance was so everyday, the physicality of it, the discipline of it, and then the performance element, which is so, like, I mean, writers don't get that. Me sitting on stage and talking to somebody or the other about my book is not the same as me performing a piece, you know.
You feel very centered.
Yeah, and also you are able to become something much larger, and you know, because I was part of someone else's vision, part of someone else's choreography. And I really, really admired, I mean, Chandra's work. I thought it was something, the most original work that I'd seen, you know, anywhere in the world. So to be part of that was just such a honor and such a wonderful thing for me, even how it sort of fed into the writing, you know.
You know, we must read from your book, so you don't want to miss that. You have to come back after the break, because Tishani is going to read 2 very nice pages from this unforgettable book, The Pleasure Seekers.